For over a decade, one specific moment in one song has constantly shattered listeners. Its raw, desperate question screamed at the peak of a musical and emotional crescendo. But what if I told you that moment wasn't where the story begins, but where it all tragically ends? To truly feel the unbearable weight of La Dispute's King Park, you have to understand the entire sprawling narrative of loss that comes before it. That final, devastating question is the breaking point after a long journey of sorrow. The song is an emotional gut punch, a landmark in post-hardcore history that leaves you breathless. But it's not a standalone piece. It's only one chapter in the much bigger, much more tragic story of the album it belongs to, Wildlife. And understanding that album's unique structure is the key to unlocking the full, devastating power of its most famous track. This isn't just about one song. It's about how an entire record can build a world of grief, empathy, and dread, piece by painful piece. So let's talk about how Wildlife drew a new blueprint for storytelling in its genre. The entire record is framed as a collection of short stories, poems, and journal entries. They're presented as if they're written by a central figure who's wrestling with his own profound sense of despair and trying to find a reason to keep going. Before you even get to the public tragedy of King Park, the album's first half is an intensely personal deep dive. It's a claustrophobic exploration of the author's own heartbreak, his own failing relationships, and his growing isolation. The song paints pictures of love decaying, of conversations that go nowhere, and the quiet loneliness that follows. It establishes a baseline of personal pain, forcing you to sit with the author in his own private sorrow. But then about halfway through, the record makes a powerful and deliberate shift. The focus turns outward. The author begins to document the tragedies of others and the stories of the wildlife from his hometown of Grand Rapids.
How senseless death, how precious life. I want to be there when the bullet hit.
This is where the album's true genius begins to surface. It stops being about a single person's pain and becomes about the collective suffering of a community. This creates a cohesive emotional dread, grounding huge existential questions about faith, purpose, and loss in very real, very painful human stories. King Park is the moment where the two worlds, the internal struggle and the external tragedies, violently collide. The song recounts a real-life tragedy that took place in Grand Rapids in 2008. The story is one of senseless violence and its devastating ripple effects. It begins with a drive-by shooting, an act that claims the life of a 16-year-old bystander, an innocent life erased in an instant.
So I float behind police lines, reconstruct the scene in fragments of memories. I wanna know what his mother looked like up close. I wanna see her leaning over his body.
What followed was a 4-day manhunt that put the entire city on edge. The search for the shooter finally ended when police cornered him. Trapped and with no way out, the shooter then took his own life.
Not far away, the shooter holed up in a hotel near to...
In the context of the album, this public tragedy becomes the author's personal breaking point. The weight of his own grief, compounded by the sheer meaningless horror of this event, becomes too much to bear. He's no longer just a narrator telling a story about the tragedy he read about. Their perspective shifts. He becomes an observer, a ghost floating through the event, trying to make sense of the chaos and pain. He imagines the victim, the police, and the shooter in their final moments. The story becomes a profound and almost unbearable exploration of how we process and endure loss when it feels like the world is collapsing. The author's personal despair merges with the city's collective trauma, leading him to question the very nature of forgiveness, redemption, and hope in a world so full of suffering. So I want to know which story within Wildlife resonates the most with you. Is it the personal heartbreak of the first half, or one of the documented tragedies in the second? Let me know in the comments below. This album is a masterclass in building a narrative, proving that music can be a vessel for the most complex and challenging stories. And if you're a fan of music history and discovering deeper layers behind your favorite albums, you're in the right place. I'm always exploring the stories that make music matter, so you should probably subscribe to keep this conversation going.